Have you ever felt like that voice in your head never stops? That it's there from the moment you open your eyes until the moment you lie down? This constant inner dialogue, this endless stream of thoughts, judgments, and doubts that seems to have total control of your day. You get up in the morning, and before you can enjoy your first breath of fresh air, there it is, you didn't get enough sleep. Today is going to be another tough day. Don't forget what you did wrong yesterday. You still haven't accomplished anything in your life. You're not enough. You're not as good as others. These words, this continuous dialogue that seems impossible to stop, does it sound familiar? Maybe you've gotten so used to that voice that you don't even realize it's there, operating in the background, dictating your mood, your emotions, your decisions. And the worst part is, you believe that voice is you, that those thoughts are the absolute truth about who you are and what you can achieve. But today, I'm here to tell you something that can change your life. That voice, that constant critic, that fear and insecurity that seem to define your existence, is not you. It's your ego. And most importantly, you can learn to silence it. Imagine what it would be like to live without that voice controlling your every move. Can you imagine it? Waking up in the morning and, instead of feeling overwhelmed by expectations and doubts, simply being at peace, living in the present, feeling the freedom to be yourself without the constant need for validation, without the pressure to be perfect, to do everything right, to not fail. This is possible. And if you stay with me until the end of this video, I promise you'll start to understand how you can free yourself from this mental prison built by your ego. Because when you can identify the ego and detach yourself from it, everything changes. Life becomes lighter, more authentic, more aligned with your true self. For this to make sense, first, we need to explore what the ego really is and why it has so much power over you. The ego is nothing more than a mental construct, a sort of fictional identity you've created over the years. Since childhood, we accumulate beliefs about who we are, how we should be, and what defines us. These beliefs don't come from nowhere, they are shaped by our experiences, our upbringing, others' expectations, failures, successes, everything. And as we grow up, we begin to identify our identity with these beliefs. We tell ourselves, this is who I am. This is what I am capable of. This is what I deserve. And that's where the ego comes in. The ego is that part of your mind that clings to this constructed identity. It's the voice that constantly reminds you that you need to protect what you believe you are, that you need to defend yourself, that you need to be better than others, that you cannot fail, that you cannot show weakness. The ego, in many ways, is a survival tool. It's designed to protect you, to make sure you stay within what it considers safe. But in its attempt to protect, what it actually does is limit you. The ego lives in fear, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of the unknown. It keeps you trapped in a comfort zone because anything beyond what it knows is perceived as a threat. That's why when you try to do something new, something that takes you out of your comfort zone, that voice appears. What if you fail? What will others think? You're not good enough for this. Don't take the risk, it's better to stay where you are. This is the ego's function, to keep you in what it considers safe. But what it doesn't tell you is that this safety is an illusion. Because while the ego keeps you safe from failure, it also keeps you safe from success, growth, and expansion. And the worst part is, we identify so much with the ego that we end up believing we are that voice. We believe that these thoughts of doubt, fear, and self-criticism are our truth. And here is where we make the biggest mistake because that voice is not your true self, not your essence. It's simply a mental construct you've built over the years. And if you can build it, you can also dismantle it. Let me tell you a story to illustrate this more clearly. Imagine a man, let's call him David. David is a regular guy, living an ordinary life. He has a stable job, a family he loves, friends, and a daily routine he follows without much variation. On the outside, everything seems fine. But on the inside, David feels trapped, like there's something more to life, something he hasn't yet discovered. And although he's had ideas, dreams, and goals, he's never dared to pursue them. Why? Because every time he tries, that voice in his head appears, "You're not smart enough. Others will do it better than you. You don't have talent. And if you fail, what will others think? Better not even try." And so, David continues his life on autopilot, goes to work, comes home, repeats the same routine day after day. But inside, there's a restlessness that won't let him be at peace. He knows he's meant for something more, but he doesn't know how to escape this mental trap. One day, by chance, David comes across a book about the ego. At first, he doesn't pay much attention, but something inside tells him he should read it. As he progresses through the pages, he starts to realize a truth he had never considered before: that voice that has been controlling his life is not him, it's his ego. And his ego, although it seems to be protecting him, is actually limiting him. David starts observing his thoughts more carefully. Every time that voice appears, instead of reacting automatically, he observes it. He notices how the ego always acts out of fear, out of the need to protect its identity. And slowly, he starts to realize that he doesn't need to listen to that voice, that he can do things differently, that he can make decisions from a place of trust rather than fear. This is the power of awareness. Awareness is the key to silencing the ego. When you realize that you are not your thoughts, when you can observe your mind from a distance, the ego loses its power. And when the ego loses its power, you regain control of your life. But here's the trick: the ego will not completely disappear. You cannot eliminate the ego because it is part of the human experience, and it wouldn't be healthy to try. The ego has its purpose. Without it, we wouldn't be able to survive in this world. But what you can do is learn to live without letting the ego control you. You can learn to recognize when it is the ego speaking and when you are acting from your true self. Your true self is that part of you that is connected to something much greater than the ego. It's the part of you that is at peace, that doesn't need external validation, that doesn't live in fear. Some call it the soul, others call it consciousness, or the higher self. It doesn't matter what name you give it, the important thing is to understand that this part of you is always there, waiting to be heard. But to connect with it, you first need to learn to silence the ego. The ego is loud, it always has something to say, always wants to be in control. But your true self is silent, it doesn't need to shout to be heard. When you manage to make space for that silence, when you manage to disconnect from the noise of the ego, that's when you start hearing the voice of your true self. And this voice, unlike the ego, does not limit you, it expands you. It reminds you that you are more than you think you are, that you have infinite potential, that you don't need to prove anything to anyone because you are already enough as you are. Of course, all of this is easier said than done, right? The ego has been in control for years, decades in some cases, and it is so deeply rooted in our way of being that disidentifying from it is not simple. This disidentification is a process that takes time, but it is completely possible. And every small step you take along this path is a victory. The first step to freeing yourself from the ego is awareness. Just start observing your thoughts. Don't try to change them, don't try to fight against them, just observe. Every time that voice appears, the one that criticizes you, limits you, tells you you're not enough, ask yourself, is this really true, or is it just my ego talking? This simple practice can have a transformative effect because the more you realize that you are not your thoughts, the easier it becomes to let go of them. The second step is to practice being present. The ego cannot exist in the present moment. The ego lives in the past, reminding you of your mistakes, or in the future, worrying about what might happen. But when you anchor yourself in the present, when you focus on what is happening here and now, the ego loses its power. And it is in this space of presence that you can begin to connect with your true self. Imagine what it would be like to live like this, without the constant burden of your limiting thoughts, without the weight of doubts and worries that drain your energy. Imagine waking up every morning feeling peace instead of anxiety, living with confidence instead of fear, pursuing your dreams not because you need to prove your worth but because you genuinely enjoy the process. This is possible. And the best part is, you don't need to change anything externally. You don't need more money, more success, or more recognition to feel good about yourself because the peace and happiness you seek are already within you. You just need to learn to silence the ego to access them. Now, this doesn't mean the path is easy. There will be days when the ego seems stronger than ever, days when you feel trapped in your old patterns of thought. And that's okay. It's not about being perfect but about being aware, about noticing when the ego is taking control and consciously choosing whether to continue listening to it or not. This is true power, the power of choice. So now, I invite you to put this into practice. Start by observing your mind, by making space for silence, by disconnecting from the noise of the ego. And if this video resonated with you, if you feel that there is something within you that wants to break free from these mental chains, I encourage you to share your experience in the comments. What does your ego say when you try to be yourself? How does it limit you? And how do you plan to start freeing yourself from it? If this message reached you, it's not by chance. You are here because you are ready to start living from your true self. And if you want to continue exploring this path, don't forget to subscribe, because this is just the beginning of a journey that can change your life forever. If you made it this far, I congratulate you. You are one of the few people who have the capacity to have such presence. And to let me know you made it here, comment, "I am awake," and I will personally greet you in the comments. See you next time.